you realize I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to interview you as much as you interview me.
Oh, I love that.
Why. Here's why. I see you kids doing all your YouTube stuff and your Twitch stuff. And to be honest with you, which I'm always honest with everybody, the thing that fascinates me about what I see from some of these, from you guys on YouTube, is your analysis of these games that we made so long ago. And your analysis of the games, from story, plotting, everything, writing, you name it, all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, how are these kids getting so smart about all this stuff? And here's what I don't want to see. And I'm not kidding. I don't want to see you guys get just stuck in this easy YouTube business. I want to see you guys start to, like, you guys are smart enough. You should be out there making like real games and like writing for games and coming up with your own stuff. And like, I want to see, you should be the future gamer makers of America. So, or whatever country you're in.
Sure. No, but I really appreciate that. Thank you. And no, I'm happy to answer any questions, but primarily, I just have, there's a lot of stuff about this, about the behind the scenes that I wanted to have some more insight on. And you especially, I think, could really shed a light on some of that. So before that, though, let's just get a couple pleasantries out of the way. How have you been with COVID, especially with the world crumbling around us? How's that been for you?
It's boring. It's as boring as hell. I mean, it's just like, I mean, every day it feels like, Groundhog's Day. Like every night I go to sleep and I'm like, really, another day in the bag? And like, I stayed in my studio, and at least my wife is here, so that's good. But I mean, like yesterday we went up over the mountains and drove into another place and had a nice day out. But one thing that's good about it is I have decided to figure out what's going on with all of these online tools and all these online communities, and like, okay, I'll do some interviews with people who are good at this. So it's exposed me. I don't think I would have been I wouldn't have jumped into especially the Halo community online interviews and all that stuff. I probably wouldn't have done that if I kept going downtown every day to my studio down there. So,
yeah, I figured that has something to do with it. It probably wasn't a coincidence that these interviews started popping up a lot more as soon as COVID hit.
Exactly.
But speaking of going down to the studio, I'm interested as to how Highwire as a company has also adjusted. Is there a lot more work at home stuff going on? How is the development cycle shifted because of this?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a business where distributed working was a thing, and a lot of people were able to say, "Hey, I think I'm going to work at home today," and we would say, "Okay, go ahead." Try not to make a habit out of it. We had a couple of people who would be, well, I'll take the job, but I need to be able to work at home twice a week. And we're like, okay, that's good. So we make sure everybody's set up, and we work on Slack and Discord. And, most of the time, even when you're in the same studio together, you're actually communicating in Slack, or you're communicating, you're actually, there was a guy, this was like a couple of years ago, I was working and I did something, and there were like, two people had the same first name, and I was talking to this one guy that in my head, I thought was a different guy who was not in the studio. And then I realized after a while, after a half an hour of texting with this guy back and forth, he was just sitting right across the desk from me. He was like, I'm like, wait, that's you? Or are we just talking? And he says, I prefer text. And I'm like, oh, geez. So anyway, that was pretty funny. So
I prefer text.
Trust me, a lot of these engineers, especially, are very introverted.
Yeah, no, I know the type.
Yeah. So anyway, my point is that technologically, we were already set up to do this. It wasn't that hard to, everybody. All the builds are on a server. We suck it down using Perforce and check stuff in, check stuff out, communicate, have stand-ups that are all virtual, and with all the technology that's been getting better and better, it just hasn't been hard for us. Now, how actually productive we are, I think that's another question. I don't know. I'm less productive. But that's not a big surprise for anyone.
I did.
People don't expect much from me anymore. So. But there are a couple of artists that have told me like they're doing way better because they don't have to commute and they just feel like they're more relaxed at home in their own studios. And so it's like, okay, we'll see. What I see us working on, what I see us doing is it looks and plays really, really well.
It's exciting to hear.
So we'll see. Yeah.
Hey, hi, hello. I'm here to interrupt your viewing experience. It's that time of year again where my bills are all due. In an unrelated note, Honey is the free browser extension that I'd be genuinely into. That is so where Honey things Honey dropless for free during a big company's Honey.com/noodle.
Something that I've noticed about a lot of interviews with you is that people tend to really fixate on the musical side of your work, regardless of what it may be.
Sure.
You've said before that you never really considered yourself Bungie's composer per se. You were more just the audio director through and through.
Yeah, I mean, composer makes it sound like I get up in the morning, I start writing music, and I have lunch, and then I write more music, and then I knock off and go to sleep.
Right.
As though I'm writing music all the time. And frankly, even in the full, 10-year period of doing Halo, the percentage of time that I was writing music where I would say, now I'm a composer, I don't think it was probably more than 15 to 20% of my total time, if that. I mean, when you think about all the other things you have to do.
I remember hearing a rumor that after painting houses, while in between working on ad jingles and transitioning to game audio, you had to convince some people that audio director should be a thing, because at the time it wasn't.
You are correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Sounds like you've done a little research, which is great. My father was a film director, so I grew up on film sets. My mother was a music teacher, so I came by all of this very honestly. But once I started working in the film and television business, doing jingles or film scores, I noticed that there were directors like my dad, and there were art directors that he would hire.
Right.
But there was no audio director. And so on every single thing I worked on, there was never an audio director. The audio was always split up between several different kinds of people. There was a composer, maybe.
Composer, audio engineer, editor.
Audio engineer, re-recording mixer. The re-recording mixer is the guy who sat at the final mixing console while the film is running. Anyway, the guy who did that mixing, or the engineer who did that mixing, usually sat with the director or maybe the sound or the editor. And they were the ones making all the decisions. And if you were a composer or a sound designer, you maybe were invited to the final mix, and you could sit out in the little theater, because this was back when they would do film mixes in what looked like a little theater.
Right.
A big screen and big speakers, and every once in a while, you could just sort of raise your hand, like, "Hello, sir, could I have some more?" It seemed like that music was a little soft, and that's like, "Shut up." So I mean, as a composer or a sound designer, you really had almost no input at all into the final mix. It was this other person, and they weren't audio directors. Their job was pretty much a technical job, where they brought all the audio elements together and mixed them. And as technology got better and better in the 80s and 90s, where our little small studios that we used to do demos in, we were able to actually finish stuff in. See, you young kids, you don't know what it's like back in the day. So I was like, hey, I would say to the clients, we're doing we could do the final music right here in our studio. And by the way, we could do sound design. And hey, why don't we just, we're mixing with the scratch voiceover. Why don't we have the voiceover guy come in our studio and just have him do it, and then we'll do the whole mix. So suddenly we were doing everything in our studio, because digitally we were able to do everything. It got better and better. And that was a big deal. And so then I started telling people in the film and television business that like I was the audio director, and they're like, no, you're not. There's no such thing. You can't do that. So when I got into the game business, I saw that there were no rules about anything. Nobody had any titles. Nobody knew what they were doing. So I would just go to meetings and say, well, I'm the audio director. And like, oh, okay.
That's what I was excited. I really wanted to, because the rumors that I heard really did make it sound like you just sort of bluffed the existence of, I love that.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I maintain to this day, I look at, EA has audio director positions,
right.
And, Ubisoft has an audio director position. And I'm like, hey, I'm the one who made that term up. But it's possible, I think I've said this before too, it's possible that somebody else back in 96 or whatever made up the term audio director in the game business. But I really think if you look into the history of it, it didn't show up until I started throwing that term around and convincing people. As a matter of fact, the very first game I worked on, which was Riven, the sequel to Myst, I tried to convince them that I should be audio director, and they basically said no.
They weren't into it, so you had to wait until Bungie to...
Well, I didn't have to wait. I was doing Bungie at the exact same time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Both Riven and Myth 1, Myth the Fallen Lords, came out in the fall of 97. So while I was working with Bungie, I said, well, I'm the audio director. And they're like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever.
I love that. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. And I love that just happened to have worked out too.
Sure.
So you were classically trained. You have a master's degree in composition, but prior to working on games, how much experience did you have with the sound design or the production side of things versus just picking that up as you went?
I didn't get really any training on the engineering, music, sound engineering side of things. That was something I picked up as the technology got better and better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remember, like I started with Mike Salvatore back in 1982.
Back in the Jingle era, or even before that.
The Jingle era. And he was a guitar player and had gotten sort of some education in sound engineering. So he had decided to build a studio in his house,
mm-hmm.
a recording studio, 8-track recording studio. So I'm like, okay, Mike's got the studio, I got the degree, and I got some connections. We'll get together, and he can play guitar, he sings, I play piano and sing. We'll get some synths. We'll just start doing this stuff. So that's how that worked. And we made it up as we went along. I think what was handy for us is that all the high-tech stuff, the synths, digital audio recording, all that stuff just started coming in naturally over the next couple of decades, through the 80s and 90s. So it's not like we were just plopped into a, technological advanced thing and we just had to learn it all.
Right.
We got to see it come along. We learned it one little step at a time. It was just, hey, look, if we get this box, we can do this cool thing. So I feel sorry for you guys because you kids come into this world where really it's like there's so much technology out there. You have to figure out, okay, well, what digital audio workstation should I learn? What tools should I learn? What principles do I need to learn? I'm really glad that I learned principles of composition sort of in the abstract because very few people are still learning this stuff anymore. It's just like, I don't care how much technology you have. It's like you guys grow up with GarageBand and you don't know what a scale is. I have just learned recently.
Yep.
I'm like, come on. Now and trust me, I've worked with Paul McCartney and he doesn't read music and he's proud of it. So I'm not saying that reading music or learning, fundamentals of music theory automatically, are a ticket to success or even are going to make you better at something. It's possible it could strangle some of your instincts, but I don't think so. I think it's still good to know some of that stuff. It's sort of like, you might be a really good writer, but there's nothing wrong with sort of knowing how to spell and grammar.
Yeah.
It's not going to kill you to know grammar, right? I mean, So anyway,
I was going to save that for later, but I was interested as to how often you consciously dip into the more formally trained side of composition versus just instincts, or is it even something that you need to consciously dip into, or is at this point it's just part of how you think about this stuff?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start on that. Number one, I would say it's all of the whole, right? So,
Right.
But every once in a while, when there's a blank page, or I have to just okay, I got to come up with something new musically. I pretty much rely on instinct at that point. Then I look at it later and I say, oh, okay, this is I was working in this mode. I did a third relationship. I was using a pedal tone. I was doing this. I was doing that. Oh, that's interesting. That's a 13th. And I didn't, without the major, minor, third. I analyze it sort of afterwards. And when I start analyzing it, that's when I can develop it. So then in development, I'm using more tools, right? It's sort of like, you doodle something and then you look at it. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That could be this, and I can morph it into something else. So I think it's a combination. I like starting with my gut first, usually, and see how it strikes me. And then I analyze what I did. And using analysis, I can extend it. That makes sense.
No, it does. It totally does. It's interesting because I know a lot of people, musically and otherwise, tend to approach that stuff completely differently depending on just their workflow. It's interesting that you use drawing as an example because a lot of the time people will start with the more analytical side. They'll reference figure drawing or get more into more mathematically correct perspective, and they'll use heavy references, and then once I've got the basic outline, then they'll sort of dip into the more creative side and embellish and exaggerate when possible. Sort of like an inverse to that.
I know other composers who really liked very formal, they think about big structures. When I did Music of the Spheres, I actually did think about a big 8-movement structure and had some big plans for the key centers and moods and all sorts of other stuff. So that was something I did a little bit differently. But as soon as I started to work on each individual piece, I went right down to the sort of, okay, what gets me going? What seems cool? And then how do I expand that?
Yeah, no, I get, when listening to Music of the Spheres, it does strike me a little bit differently. Structurally speaking, I don't want to say more traditional, but no, maybe that is a good word for it. I don't know. It's
a little bit more formally structured.
That's a good way to put it. Even compared to Gollum's prequel, which the name escapes me at the moment.
Echoes of the First Dreamer.
Thank you. Even though they're very similar in premise and format, and I guess to an extent structure, they still have a difference in personality and tone, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the scale and where the inspiration is coming from. Gollum's a much more personal story, whereas Destiny was... I think you at one point mentioned that it was supposed to be a sort of... Yeah, it was supposed to be a sort of prelude, and like it would set the groundwork for the musical themes you wanted to use when composing for the game itself.
Yeah, nice plan, huh?
Yeah.
That worked out great.
Eventually, you got to do that with Gollum, right?
That's true. So now, wait a minute. But you have actually a surprising... So this is the other thing I liked, is that I saw your first thing that you made me laugh, which was why Halo was important, I think. And then I saw you complaining about the remake, which, by the way, I agree with. But then I think I saw something that had been done before about adaptive audio or whatever. And I thought, oh, this guy actually, he kind of notices this stuff, which most people don't. So you must have some sort of music background too. Is that true?
Not formally, but I do come from a musical family. My dad, I don't know how to say this. My dad I'll just say it. My dad almost made it at one point back in the 80s.
Cool.
He was doing synth rock over in England for a while.
Okay.
So he still got there's
He was part of Pet Shop Boys. That's pretty cool.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now you have to look up Pet Shop Boys so you know who I'm talking about.
I did all this research about the kind of musical people you talk about, and then you throw a new one at me. Now I have to do more. I felt so smart for knowing about Gentle Giant and all this stuff.
Yes, well, we'll talk about that. But how did you get your? I gotta say, the other thing that intrigued me was your animations, which are super minimal and simple, but you have a sense of the simplest little turn of mouth or blinky of the eye or posture of a character or a slight turn of a head and timing. And it's really good. I mean, I don't know what your background is or where you're attracted to, but you shouldn't just dink around. At some point you should really get serious, because what you're doing, even with your natural stuff, is very watchable and a lot of fun. So you have a good sense of timing, which is everything.
Oh my God, yes. No, I could go on for hours about how timing can make or break something, comedically or otherwise.
Absolutely, yes. This is why I'm always the one saying I need more black. So
yes. No, I remember you and Joe and I forget who else, but the three guys. Whenever you did the commentary track for the original Halo,
Jason,
yes,
Jason, yeah.
It was the flood reveal, Guilty Spark.
Yeah.
Right. What was that? The first or second time you saved Halo by having there be a 5 to 10 second delay before the waves start coming in.
I did. That was actually Jamie Griesmer, the guy who I'm working with now. He's my business partner and creative director for Highwire. But Jamie was the final one to work on 343 Guilty Spark, that level. He was the level design for that. And had gone through a couple iterations, and we got to that point, and suddenly, I think I've talked about it, but all of a sudden, as soon as the cutscene ended, all these flood just attacked instantly.
Yeah,
and I'm
you
like,
were saying in that
and so, I had to make a deal with Jamie to make him give me time. He says, how much time do you want? And I'm like, I want 2 minutes. I forget. I wanted more than he wanted to give me, but I knew I was going to ask for more. And then he would give me a certain amount. And I think the amount that was given was just about right. He felt like the cutscene was too long and that people were going to be so bored by having not fired their weapon for so long that he had to just immediately slam the flood on top of you. And I'm like, no. You have to let people live back in their bodies and believe that something really horrible happened around them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then look around and not know where it is. And I can just increase the creepiness of the level, and then boom, we can start. So
does he still stand by that?
Oh yeah, no. He stands by that. He gave me enough time.
Okay, fair enough. But to go back to answer your question, which by the way, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Musically, I don't really have much more to say other than, musical background with Dad, and both of them fell into that stupid thing whenever in the late 90s they thought that classical music would make babies smarter or something stupid like that. So I had a lot of,
maybe it did.
I don't know about that. All I know is that it pissed me. Sorry, it made me really angry as a kid, but now I really enjoy a lot of that stuff.
Well, I really did. I did really scare you about the language thing, didn't I? That's good.
And as far as animation, that's all self-taught. That's just looking at stuff and studying it. And I bought one book.
Okay, well,
and I didn't read most of it.
So I'm not an expert on animation, but I've worked with animators for decades, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I can tell you is that timing is everything. Timing is everything in storytelling, in game design, in music, in animation. The difference. You talked to Jamie about the sandbox and the firing rate on a plasma rifle, and how different that can change everything. And me saying, I need one more beat here in the trailer before the reveal, or an animator saying, I need 20 frames to do this animation instead of 15. I mean, these are things that we will, fight and die over. And they're micro timing things, but anybody who's really in the business believes that kind of stuff is super important.
Oh my God,
you have an automatic sense of timing, which is great. A lot of times just people who are artists, they just think about composition. They look at a screen and they go, yeah, this rock needs to be here and this thing needs to be here. And and then they move it a little bit here and here and here. Meanwhile, I look at that and say, well, until I know how long I'm on that shot, I don't have a sense of what I need to do. Like, are we going to pan through it? Are we zooming in? How long does it take? How are we moving through the scene?
Will someone appear on the screen? It's just... no, there's... again, absolutely. And I mean, both on a micro and macro scale, that stuff is super important. The timing and pacing go hand in hand whenever it comes to structuring anything. I
mean, how did you decide... I'm going to interview you.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Your opening of your Halo was important thing, which was hilarious.
Well, thank you.
When you floated in singing the monk chant, and you stuck your friend with a plasma grenade. And I don't even know if those are on, running characters or what, but you put the plasma grenade on your friend and you floated up. And then you just sat there on the plasma grenade sound.
Yeah.
And nothing's moving. And boom, then it happens. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you tried different timings. I don't know why that was the perfect timing, but it absolutely made me laugh. It was perfect. So
I love that.
That's how you're supposed to do that.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, no, I mean, there's no math to that. That's good. I'm not saying it's math. But you do care about that. Yeah, no, it really comes down to just instinctive stuff a lot of the time when it comes to stuff like that. And I'm not about to compare my goofy YouTube videos to any of the stuff that you've been a part of, but I really appreciate that you pointed that out, and I do agree. Yeah. Back on track here for a bit. You've spoken before about your approach to recording for games. How you'll often record instruments separately rather than all of them together, so that it's easier to mix and separate the stems, which makes a lot of sense. But a lot of the magic that makes music feel more intimate, I think most any musician would agree, is the human element, the imperfections. Mm-hmm. So, like, how do you get a passionate performance out of everyone while, presumably having them play on their own to a click? Like, that's infamously killed a lot of recordings, having it quantized and this and that. Yes.
So the click sometimes might be, believe it or not, might just be a piano track that I've played that I will. So it won't be necessarily a click track. It'll be a piano track that people can listen to. So if I'm playing something with some feel and some ebb and flow to it, then they just need to match that. And then other times it'll be just a click to get in, and I'll ask the conductor to conduct it freely. Like the majority of Music of the Spheres, everybody was in the studio at the same time, and the conductor conducted it in a felt way. We weren't trying to synchronize with a movie or anything, so we could do that. But for the most part, when I hire musicians to come in, if I have the piece done the way I want it, like for Echoes of the First Dreamer, there's a lot of rubato, and that rubato means breathing and ebbs and flows and stuff. Yeah. And if you have, let's say, the strings, 10 violins, 10 violas, 10 cellos, whatever it is, you have a big group of strings. You have 25, 30 string players. If the first thing you do is you have them all play the whole piece together, and they play it with feeling, you've got that recorded. Then you can go in and say, okay, now just first violins, but listen to what you just did. So the first violins are playing again to the emotional performance they just did. And so they're playing it again that way. And so I still get emotions and feeling from, even if I isolate just the first violins, they're playing it the way they played when they were hearing everybody at the same time.
Is that always the way you did it? Or earlier
not always, no. Like the Halo 1 theme,
Okay, well that's a bit of a given. There's so much synth in the Halo.
Well, except the very first Halo, there is we know we had sampled strings, and then I brought in the live players, which was a small group, but they played along with what they heard.
Right.
But they were playing very aggressively. So like I would tell the cellist, like, no, play aggressive, and I like the slop. I'm looking for the sound of the strings in between the other notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 da. So they're going way across the bar. They're going, tense or jumping tense.
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 which, by the way, is one of the things I don't like about the anniversary edition is they didn't record it the way I wrote it. They did. They split the strings up. With the low strings just went da 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 da, and the upper strings went da da
yeah
da 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 da. It's like, no, it's not da 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 da. It's da 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 da. That's what they should be playing, all of that. And that aggressiveness and confusion is built into the music, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I got at the original recording. And then they walked away from it because they didn't know what I had done, because they weren't allowed to talk to me, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, yes, it is. You've had the chance to work with some incredible voice talent over the years, whether it be, big names like Keith David and Nolan North, or, more niche fan favorites, guys like Andrew McCage or David Scully or, Bob O'Donnell. With all that experience working with actors, what are some tips or tricks or just pointers or anything like that you think could help aspiring directors or voice directors?
Well, I have a hard and fast rule, which I do not break unless something has gone really south. And that is, you do not do line reads for your actors. So you give them the script, you give them the emotions, you give them the setup, you answer their questions, but you never read the line to them. Now, there are a couple of guys like Nolan North will say, hey, it's okay, go ahead, give me a line read. I'm fine with that. And I'm like, of course you are, you're lazy. I mean, he would rather just get in and get out, because he is the best mimic I've ever seen in my life. That guy can mimic in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So if you say, hey, come over here, you got to get over to the left side and get the tank, he'll go, hey, come over here, you got to go to the left side and get the tank. And he'll just give you exactly back what you did. And then and that's the worst thing.
Yeah,
right?
Because you don't want that from an actor. You want to hear what their interpretation of it is, right?
Exactly. So a lot of times their first line reads, and you'll go, oh man, they're putting the emphasis on a different word or a different syllable, and they're putting a comma in or a pause where I'd never heard it before.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially like Joe and I, let's just go with Halo. Joe would be the main script writer, and we would do a table read. And I would play a lot of the character voices. Maybe a couple other guys would be around the table, and we would read through it. And a lot of times I'm just listening for, is the meaning coming through? Or are there weird syllables that aren't going to translate? Is there stupid sci-fi jargon that is idiotic and should be cut? I mean, I'm looking at it from one way, but we've spent time with the scripts, hopefully. And then we give it to the actors, and what we want then is something that's fresh and we haven't heard before. But
yeah,
a lot of times writers will say, no, they hear it a certain way in their head, and that's what they want to hear back. And as audio director, I'm more, if I hear something that's way better than anything we ever did at a table read, let's use that. So with the actors, I'll do many, many takes. I don't want to tire them out, but I'll do many takes. I'll keep all the takes. I don't make my selects usually at the session. I like to go later after a day or two and listen to the session again. And I go, I didn't even notice it, but take 3 is way better than take 5. That's that. I'm using that one instead.
Yeah.
So no line reads, and record everything. I mean, there's no reason not to record everything. Get lots of takes and come at it with fresh ears on another day. So you record everything on one day. only tell the actors the minimal that they need to know in order to get the right emotions. So if you say, yeah, read this line like you just heard that your brother died. Okay. And you've probably seen video of me making fun of Joe because he gives too much backstory to an actor.
Actually, I can see the actor's eyes start to glaze over and they have no idea what that means. So they'll say, so you want it faster? And then I'll go, yeah, faster.
That is true. I mean, a writer sometimes feels like, the actor needs to have all this backstory, but the actor is usually there. They got another gig after your gig. They're doing something else. They don't even understand, they have no possible way of understanding the huge history of their own character in this game. But what they should be able to do is read a line as though they just found out that their brother died. And if they could do that, then that's all we need. They don't need to know that they were, taken by Halsey when they were 7 years old and had all their bones replaced. And they don't need to know any of that stuff.
Right.
I don't think Steve Downes knew anything about Master Chief's backstory. All he needed to know for me was, basically you're Clint Eastwood, you're a man of few words, but everything you say is important.
Right.
Okay. So that's all I needed.
Yeah, no, but I do really like the push and pull there, especially when it comes to directors. There's often a tendency for people to fall into this sort of, okay, can you be more happy? Or, just trying to switch emotions like dials, which is, from what I've heard, the worst thing you can do. Actors need a bit more context as well.
Don't want it. They need enough context, and it's then you get to the point, if you're trying to fine tune a take, if you've given them the right emotional place to begin with, you don't want to suddenly switch. Okay, I know I told you your brother just died, but now pretend that it's a surprise birthday party and read the same line.
Yeah.
That's insane. So, but it's okay, so it is sad, but you can say, just be just a little bit less external with your emotion now. Or, now I actually just need it a little bit faster. Or can you just do it a little bit softer? Just those kinds of things you can get. You're fine tuning.
Right.
You're not just taking the giant dial and going, you were sad, now be happy. It's
right.
No, that's stupid. Yeah.
Whether it be poor mixing or annoying sound effects or overscoring or whatever, games today of all scales and budgets can be pretty hit or miss in the audio department, as we mentioned in the past. Mm-hmm. What are some of the biggest audio-related mistakes that you see in games today? What are they? How do you think they happen? And what can developers do to avoid making those mistakes?
First of all, do nothing that's annoying. Sound can be the most annoying thing ever. Repetitive sound, bad mixing. Just don't be annoying. That's the first thing. The second thing is, don't think by adding more stuff it's going to get better. Sometimes it just gets cluttered and your sound palette is cluttered and you can't mix anymore.
Less is more. Sometimes nothing is the most.
Sometimes nothing is the most. And if you want your music to stand out, then make sure you've had a lot of no music around it. So just shut up. Just don't have music for a while. And then when music comes in, it can really have a place. The other thing I would say is that so if you know anything about digital audio, there's a thing called normalizing, where you can take any recording, normalize it, and it's let's normalize everything. And it's that's not the way the world is. Most things in the world are very soft. If you record a real environment, it's like the noise floor, the sounds you're hearing are just above the noise floor. Yeah. And then, a bird chirps and it's up here. Well, if you normalize everything, the noise floor now is as loud as the bird chirping or the tree falling. And suddenly, I hear this all the time with, weapons Foley. It's like the same volume as the background ambience. It makes no sense. Yes. And this is a mistake that happens in TV and film too. Yeah. It's like the sound of the hero sound of the guy getting punched is as loud in the scene as the nuclear explosion that happens 10 seconds later.
Yeah.
Because you can only be so loud, right?
Yeah, and
So,
especially with TV, I think they have a compression of some kind over the master output or something. I know radio does that. It drives me insane.
yes. So dynamic range is, to me, probably one of the most important things as you're creating stuff, as you're making sounds. If you're doing Foley of somebody drawing a gun out of their holster and then cocking it and then shooting it, well, you already know the loudest thing needs to be the firing.
Right.
If you normalize the weapon click and the drawing out of the leather to be normalized, everything is at 100%, then that's ridiculous. It doesn't sound real. I mean, I get mad at the startup sounds on these games. Like, I'm just like playing Halo Master Chief Collection. I'm like, oh my gosh, the opening sound that you cannot control is louder than anything else in the game. Yeah. I'm like, why? Make that the soft thing so people go, oh, gee, maybe I should turn my computer up. And then the game starts. You're like, whoa, it's loud and cool. But no, I turned the whole computer down because your stupid opening boom on, the logo comes up. And it's the loudest thing you could possibly do. They did that with the Xbox logo. They did that with the PlayStation logo. They make those things like the loudest hero sounds you can get. And then all the games are softer than that. And it's like, oh, that's smart.
You remind me a bit of my dad. He loves to he loves to complain about the Netflix sound effect, especially that gigantic boom that comes in every time you launch the app.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's horrible. That is. Yeah. No. Anyway.
Yeah.
Dynamic range. Louds aren't loud unless there's a lot of softs. So you can't have all loud all the time.
I think the industry is getting better with that kind of thing. But I also, if I had to guess, and this is a guess of a dude who doesn't know how games are made, but I think a lot of that probably has to do with maybe a tendency to overcompensate for less than ideal sound setups. Crappy Turtle Beach headsets, or back in the day, a stereo CRT TV with the speakers built in, because the audio is so poor, the environment is so bad to begin with, that some of that more quiet stuff is just going to be lost if you treat it like you would a proper setup with good headphones or 5.1 surround. So I don't know. I don't know if you've seen this. A lot of games, the last one I can think of is The Last of Us Part 2, but Naughty Dog especially are really good with this stuff. They'll just let you choose. Before you even start the game, it'll show you a setup for your audio setup. So you can choose, okay, I have stereo, quadraphonic, 7.1, and you can choose the dynamic range, and whether you want voices to be mixed to the center speaker or to all the front speakers, and it's really intuitive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that is nervous about doing that, and then there's a part of me that understands why you want to give people the options. What I would say is you want to make sure that whatever the default is the very, very best default, because most people, I think the statistics tell us that it's something like 92% of everybody never changes a single default setting. So that means you better make sure your defaults are good. You shouldn't depend on people customizing their settings. If people want to open the hood and set the points on their own spark plugs, that's fine with me. I'm a little nervous. Like I sometimes I've talked about it like making a gourmet, meal. It's like, look, I'm going to do my best. You can trust me as a chef. I'm going to make this great gourmet meal, and then I'm going to present it to you.
Yeah.
And the first thing I'm not going to do is say, well, here's some Tabasco, here's some ketchup, here's some A1 sauce, and here's some salt and pepper, and here's some garlic powder. Just go ahead and season it the way you normally like to season things.
Right.
See, I know I'd rather have somebody eat the thing I made and say, wow, this is kind of bland. And then, okay, well, that's the way I liked it. Rather than have people go, I always put this much salt and this much garlic and this much pepper on everything. There's always
that fear. If you show them that they can play with it, then they might get a little overzealous, change things the way they're not supposed to be, end up smothering it in ketchup or whatever.
Exactly. So I'm going to always be a little bit more of a control freak when it's like, no, you should play it my way. You should accept my mix. The problem with that, of course, is that we have much more understanding and control over console systems than we do, let's say, PCs. And everybody's sound card is different. Everybody's, there's so many different variables that go into that. And most of the time, people who have PC systems understand their own unique system enough that they should probably have some tools to change stuff up a little bit.
Where would you say that you find the most inspiration from sonically? Like, do you draw more from the classically trained music theory, Jerry Goldsmith side of things, or the gentle giant prog rock stuff?
Yeah, I don't think I can split those two. That's
what I thought. Yeah, it's a bit of a mix.
It's internalized within me. Sometimes I don't know where things come from. It could have been some Peter Gabriel thing that I completely forgot about, or it could have been some Bach piece I played when I was 12 years old. So
it could be Yesterday from the Beatles, for example.
It could be Yesterday from the Beatles. I did that one on purpose. Yeah, it's like, the way I look at it is that you are, I think I've talked about this in one of my talks, which is, whatever your heroes are, whoever your hero is, don't follow in their footsteps. Seek what they sought.
That's a great way of putting it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, well, that's not my thing. It's a famous Japanese philosopher. I can't remember his name. Look it up. But yeah, don't follow in their footsteps. Seek what they sought. It's just a great way to think, because it's like, whatever they were after, well, I'm going to want to go after that too. Like, I want to affect people emotionally by storytelling or music and storytelling, and I'm going to do that. And Nicholas Rosa did it with Ben-Hur, and I was 7 years old and I heard it and my mind was blown. Well, I'm not going to try to become Nicholas Rosa. He's this Greek crazy guy who, died in the 60s or whatever. Like, I know nothing about Nicholas Rosa. I'm not going to follow in his footsteps. Now, I do want to learn orchestration and counterpoint and theory, maybe the way he did, that he learned. I want to understand the fundamentals of constructing music and composing. But I'm seeking that same thing. I don't want to go, oh, I need to sound like this piece from Ben-Hur, so I'm going to copy that.
Yeah.
Like, no, I want to make my own. If you're going to make culture, something that affects culture, you have to absorb culture, and then whatever comes out of you as an artist is going to reflect what you absorbed and consumed. But hopefully, if you have integrity, you're going to have your own approach.
Yeah, so. I think it really just comes down to inspiration versus imitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for me at least, when I compare stuff like Oni or Myth to your newer material, Gollum, ODST, Music of the Spheres, etc., I feel like I can hear you getting more confident in some of your ideas. So, like, assuming I'm correct in that judgment, what was the process of building that confidence? Like, do you think it came more from having a growing number of successful projects under your belt, or, just the fact that, just the act of experimenting more with different musical ideas?
That's very interesting. So, as an artist, I think you're fighting the imposter syndrome. No matter how old you get, you're fighting the syndrome of, like, okay, is my best stuff behind me? If I visit the well one more time, is it going to be dry? Like,
yeah.
That really still stays inside my head. So, but I've gone back to what I thought was an empty well so many times and still come up with something that I just sort of, and because I've done it enough times, I kind of have the confidence that I'll probably do it again. So I think there is more confidence there. And sometimes it's also stuff that I was unsure of at first. Sometimes those are the things over time I've gone, wow, I was unsure about that, and that, and they all turned out to be really successful. Now, that doesn't mean everything I'm unsure of will be successful, but it gives me more confidence that I don't have to just throw away something that I am unsure of. I live with the uncertainty longer to see how it's going to, what kind of legs it has.
Right.
So I think it's interesting and insightful on your part that you're hearing that, building of confidence over my career. So that's fascinating. I would never have thought about that.
No.
Although as I'm actually playing ODST again now. I haven't played it in years, and I'm like, wow, there's some nice stuff in here. And like, I'm glad I went with that. And I remember when I came up with that little lick, and, you know, I was confident enough just to keep going with it and believe that this might actually work out. So yeah,
it was bold.
I think I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I remember. I think part of what got me thinking about this was I don't know. After I put out my first Halo video, my dad decided to play all of them, which I'm quite proud of.
Excellent! Way to go!
I was just very interested in his reaction whenever he first heard some of Halo 3 stuff. He couldn't help but say out loud, "Wow, that's bold." And not in a bad way, but just like, wow, opening with piano, just 2 notes, okay. Like, I don't think he would have done that with some of your earlier work, and it really shows.
No, that's probably true. Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, so there is a little bit of a story there. Piano tended to be sort of a scratch track instrument. It's something you use and then you orchestrate the real instruments. We had one piece that was primarily a piece Mike wrote, and I've told this story before, but like when we were doing Myth, I had this cello line, da, 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 you know, it was all dark and mysterious, and then we needed a bunch more music. And Mike had a piece that was just very simple piano. It was the Siege of Madrigal. I'm like, Mike, I really like this, but that's like, I should have done that. He goes, yeah, I was thinking, what would Marty do? And I'm like, well, yeah, I wanted to do that. So, but anyways, so when I put the Siege of Madrigal into the game, and then Jason Jones came and like, oh, I don't know about that piano. And I'm like, no, Jason, trust me. This is a good one. People are going to like this. This is going to be memorable. It's a bold choice.
Yeah.
So he goes, oh, okay. So I convinced him that it should be in there. And then because people ended up really liking it, and because it almost got killed because Jason wasn't sure about it, I sort of as a joke, I put it as the Easter egg in every game we ever did since then. There's some place in the level that you can hear Siege of Madrigal. And when we got around to doing Halo 3 and the trailer, and I just did these piano notes, that I really did do piano notes.
Yeah.
Just as a sync point for me to know where things were happening on the screen. But I every time they played, I liked the feeling I had.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to go with that. But I think I've told the story, but like when the Microsoft marketing execs heard it, they laughed. So I had to like say, okay, it doesn't matter that these nimrods laughed. I'm going to go ahead and double down on it and dung, gang, 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 just on piano. Like I'm going to like, and so I'm not sure if I would have done that if they hadn't laughed. So that's interesting.
That's interesting because I mean, a lot of people would be killed by that. People laughing at something that you wanted to take seriously, that's just okay. Well, that idea is never okay. Yeah.
No, I felt very risky. I mean, I felt like, oh gosh, maybe I'm wrong. But like, and I knew the context of where that trailer was going to be seen for the first time, and like everybody else they were all blur trailers with, you know, trailer music, and they all looked and sounded the same. And then Halo 3 came on, and it sounded different, it looked different, and of course, sometimes that's all you need to do. You just need to stand out from everybody else. So, speaking of Halo, when it comes to games, I'd assume there's always some degree of compromise, like you said. But Halo 2 is a bit of a special case. Bungie devs have described it in the past as things like harsh or brutal, and my favorite was like they were going to die. I'd like to talk about that a little more in depth if you're comfortable with that, because I know that was a very turmoilous. I didn't say that right. It was a very whatever. Tumultuous. Thank you. Yes, I did that yesterday too. I was like, okay, I'm gonna remember this time. All right. Okay. Okay. Cool. So. So for those who aren't aware, just for context, do you think you could give a sort of brief rundown of what happened with Halo 2? You know, what went wrong, what the E3 demo, and what that was all like from your perspective? Yeah, well, let's just take a step back. One thing I can say that I've learned over all the years is there are many, many things that are important in game development and selling a game. Okay. Mm-hmm. So how you introduce the game to the public, how you get people all riled up about buying a game, and then how you get the game into people's hands. All those things are important. They're not equally important. So if you,
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So what I would say, and what I've learned is, if you find that you're working way more on the show to sell the game than you actually are on the game, you probably are in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake we started to make on Halo 2. Many things that went into that. Number one, we started Halo 2 after Halo 1 became this big success. So the expectations were really high. And we put pressure on ourselves, like, oh yeah, we have to just really knock it out of the park. And then we did some stupid things in terms of leadership and sort of splitting the studio up into different projects, rather than saying, hey, everybody, there's nothing we can do about this. Halo 2 is the giant gorilla in the room, right? It's like, you have to just pay attention to Halo 2. You can't have two other projects, in the wings happening at the same time. And then we did this other thing, which was the very first trailer we did, where Master Chief jumps out and Cortana says, "What if you miss?" "I won't." Like, that was a cool trailer. And it was like, that whole trailer was shot one frame at a time in engine, so we could tell everybody this is all rendered in engine.
Yeah. Why am I not surprised?
People to this day do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I say, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you were on another podcast. I love the way that it was put, where it's like, we have to now say that it's rendered in engine because we know you're suspicious.
Well, I mean, there were so many. We would see other trailers and stuff. It was like, oh, that wasn't rendered in their engine. This is, this is Maya. This is whatever. This is something else. So it's like, no, this is our engine, and we had invented and implemented stencil shadows into the engine. So like walking through and the lights spinning and the shadows going, and the stuff
dynamic
looks
lighting.
spectacular. Dynamic lighting was so cool. The elevator coming down, him jumping out. It's like a great trailer. So it's like, wow, we excited everybody like crazy. Like, that was our teaser trailer to say to the world, hey, everybody, we're doing Halo 2. So here's how cool it's going to be. People went nuts. And it wasn't long after that that we realized, well, now we have to do something for E3 the following year. And this time we thought, okay, we better do a really big show where we play the game live to prove to everybody you can play this game. So now it's all about working on the game being able to be played live. And that's when the stencil shadows started getting less and less. So if you look at the E3 live gameplay trailer, which starts with Sergeant Johnson saying, in the big theater version,
no smoke and mirrors. I promise. No
smoke and mirrors, bullshit. Yeah, that was great. And then there wasn't. That was the way the game played. Unfortunately, we couldn't ship that game either.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't running on an Xbox, right? Or at least
no, it was running. Those were running on Xbox.
Oh,
those
really?
Were running on Xbox. Yes, absolutely. That demo ran. It didn't have trouble. We just couldn't do the whole game the way we did that demo.
Okay.
The thing is that we kept, like, the very first teaser trailer, we used the engine to make this great trailer. And then the next trailer, which was live gameplay, we used live gameplay and the engine to do it. But it was so scripted. If we had kept going in that direction, we would have shipped Call of Duty. Because, I'm sorry, but Call of Duty is...
it's extremely scripted.
And those are great. It's not like those aren't fun things, but they're scripted things that you just navigate your way through the way the designer wants you to go. Every step you take, you trigger the next scripted thing. We're all about randomization, ability to choose where you want to go, different weapons, different vehicles, and sandbox, AI responding in sandbox. So
pseudo non-linearity, that just the player choice, et cetera, et cetera.
And the E3 demo in Earth City was just totally scripted. Like
Yeah.
you were on a rail. All these things were there to just be this great, dramatic, scripted gameplay. It was real. Like, we were like the star of the show, and we had some hefty competition. So we won the show, but when we got back to the studio, we were like, yeah, we haven't been working on the game. We've been working on this show, and we can't ship that. And when you realize that what you spend all this time, it's like rip everything out. None of that's shippable. That was pretty depressing.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. We realized we couldn't ship what we showed.
For context and perspective, I doubt I'm the first person to say this, but Halo 2 is a 3-act structure with no third act. There was so much that had to be ripped out.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, that is like, Halo 2 is a 3-act structure with no third act. So Act 3 is Halo 3.
Yeah.
I mean, we realized that right towards the end. And I mean, I remember, I'm sure I've talked about this before too, but like when Joe showed me what had been cut, like in all the stuff that we were going to have to throw away and redo. And I said to him at the end, I'm looking at the script and I'm like, Joe, are you telling me that we're ending the game and as the arbiter? And he goes, no, you're the Master Chief. I said, no, you're the Master Chief in a cutscene. The last level you play, the last character you are playing as a character that you're in control of is the arbiter. That's not going to work. And he's like, yeah, we don't have any choice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's why I would say people are going to throw their controllers at the TV. And here's the thing. It's like, well, it's a cliffhanger. I'm like, oh gosh, that's the worst thing to do. A three-year wait for a cliffhanger. It's like, I just thought it was really unfair. I love the fact that people still think Halo 2 is like the best Halo ever. I'm just like, that is hilarious to me.
Well, there's a lot to love about it, but if you take a step back
you could play Halo 1, 2, and 3 all like in one sitting on the Master Chief Collection. It's like, okay, well now you can binge it. It's great, but boy, like
I was replaying the game with my sister a little while ago. I remember whenever we finished Halo 2, I was so ready for her to have this negative reaction of just like, really? but instead she was just like, oh, okay, cool. And I think I had to ask, like, okay, why are you not mad about that ending? Why are you reacting this way? And it's, well, because Halo 3 is right here. I can just we're doing that in a week. It's like, oh
yeah, of course, go back to 2004.
Yeah.
When we didn't even, we weren't even promising there was going to be a Halo 3. Obviously, when you finished Halo 2, sir, finishing this fight.
Yeah.
Fade to black. I remember even saying to Joe, there's not enough black in the universe that you can give me for me to give a satisfying ending to this game. No, we'll give you black and you bring the music in and it'll feel like an ending. It's like, no, it will never feel like an ending.
It'll feel like it's trying to be an ending.
Yeah, I could still sing what the music does there, and it's like, it's not going to work.
Oh, man.
Anyway, but how old were you? Did you play it when it came out? You couldn't play it when it came out.
I was pretty late to the party. I remember... You'll probably like this. I remember being in elementary school, and one of the cool kids of what was it, second or third grade, came into school holding a backpack like there was something he shouldn't have in there, like there's something like, yeah, you don't. It's like a drug dealer about to show you what's under the trench coat. But it's but he just comes over, a bunch of us huddle up in around in a circle, and he just shows us a copy of Halo 2, and it's just, how did you get this? I think I started playing Halo 1 shortly after that, and that was one of my first games, full stop. But you probably know that.
I know that I know enough about your story only from the couple of videos I've watched of you. So like when you say Halo is really important to you, I'm like, well, that's cool. But like, I didn't really know how old you were. I assumed you were young, but somehow Halo 1 sort of started you in a certain, like you appreciate what was happening in your experience with Halo 1, that you judge a lot of other things by that, which I think is cool. And frankly, I mean, I'm thrilled that, you know, a lot of these stories I've told 20 years ago, right? So I'm glad to be able to continue telling these stories to a new generation of kids. But I'm actually glad that there's more generations of people who actually appreciate what we did. And it actually has some legs and it lasts. And to a certain extent, it seems to differentiate from other games that you could be playing right now. There's still something that we did that some people, I don't know if they didn't learn from it. I'm hoping that everybody, like your generation, kind of learns from what we did and says, hey, you know, if they did it 20 years ago, we should be able to do that now. Because I feel like there's some lessons that were lost along the way. I'm not sure why.
I don't know. I think it really comes down to a case-by-case basis. I'm sure a lot of developers are more receptive to that sort of thing than others. Different people are more inclined to care about certain things and learn different ways. But yeah, to very briefly answer your question, yeah, I started playing Halo 2 after I got Halo 1, but I finished Halo 2 before Halo 1.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly the best way to experience it, but it was really just because I couldn't resist not playing Halo 2 when I had a copy of it, but I got stuck at some parts of Combat Evolved, so I'll just play Halo 2 instead. So yeah, I don't think you really, whenever you're like 7 or 8 years old, I don't think you really have enough of an understanding of storytelling to be mad about a cliffhanger, especially when you can go back and play the prequel immediately, you know? Sure. But retroactively, yeah, no. If I was this age and I played that, I would be. I don't. I have some choice words.
Yeah.
So, how much of the game really ended up on the cutting room floor? Like, beyond the story, how much of what shipped on that disc in 2004 is a product of creativity versus compromise?
That is a really good question.
I know you've got the voice acting for the whole third act archived somewhere.
I do. I mean, and that's the voice acting with the Arbiter being the dervish.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole bunch of Michael Wincott as the Prophet of Truth, you know, being chased by Keith David through the Ark that was on the Earth.
Right.
And the big climax is on Earth, and the Ark that was uncovered at New Mombasa. So yeah, I mean, this stuff like the script is done first, and then we hope the general game design is crafted with some story elements, and then the script is kind of written around that, because you have to get actors hired, and you have to do that stuff, and you have to animate. So we never got to the point of animation on any of that third act stuff. So I had the voice work is about the only thing we had. And then we realized we had to go cut all that, change it. I had to bring some of the actors back into the studio and do the new stuff. So it's to me, a lot of it seems like a compromise, but we compromised with 6 months left to go? I forget what. Well, it's funny. I mean, you see right behind me there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Delta Temple. That's the whiteboard for Delta Temple. That's the actual whiteboard for Delta Temple. Paul Bertone had all these whiteboards that he took with him, had him in his house. He told me and Jamie he was going to trash him. And I'm like, no! So I went and picked
that's
up
great.
two.
That's history. I'd love to have a scan of that or something. Just be able to see
I put it on Twitter.
I'll have to check that. It's always fun seeing how this stuff came together, especially with something as chaotic as Halo 2.
Yeah, I've got High Charity on one side. I'll show it to you. So that's High Charity.
Oh.
And that's Delta Temple. And it's actually interesting to see.
Concept art. Is that concept art on a whiteboard?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to look at that later.
And the reasons we have the whiteboards is because once we knew we were going to cut all this stuff, it's like, okay, Paul Bertone, Joe Staten, Jason Jones all went into this one office, locked themselves away. It was right by my desk. We put a sign up called what we call it, the clubhouse, I think. So we just like, don't disturb the clubhouse. And they had whiteboards in the clubhouse, and they rejiggered the whole way the game was going to go. We kept as much stuff as we could. And then they came out and presented, here's what the new levels are going to be, and here's where you end, and here's what the deal is. And then we went to town actually trying to execute on that. So,
speaking of troubled development, it's no secret that Golem's development was a little troubled at times. Are you comfortable shedding on light on some of the challenges that you and the team faced while working on it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a very small team. I think the dev team for Golem was maybe between 8 and 10 people total. We took the chance of like, let's jump into this new technology, and Sony wanted us to do something for the PlayStation VR.
Right. And
the PlayStation VR, of course, was a product that hadn't shipped. It was unproven. There was no market, but they were willing to fund us to do something. So it was unproven technology. We decided to do something that no one had done with the technology. The team at Sony that were the ones who hired us to begin with and believed in what we were doing left. Like, one guy went and started a company in Chicago, another guy went to another company. Everybody just was gone. Suddenly we would call, and there was like none of our friends were at Sony anymore. It was all new people, and they didn't really know who we were. So there was a point where some money sort of didn't get paid, and things happened, and Christmas was canceled for us. I mean, it was like, what is going on? And it was a crisis. It was an existential crisis for Highwire. We were like, I don't know if we can finish this. So I don't know if they're going to keep funding us. We didn't know what was going to happen. We had to start looking to do other things. So when it all kind of got straightened around a little bit, we were able to get back to working on, we got the money to finish Golem, but we didn't get, we really missed the opportunity to ship at a point where it probably would have been opportune.
The holiday VR craze.
Yeah. If we had shipped then and had this new control scheme that no one had seen before, but everything was kind of new at the beginning, so people would have maybe been so reluctant to try something different. By the time we did ship, which was at least a year late, whatever small niche market was even playing VR games, they were like, well, this is how VR should be controlled, and you guys are doing some wacko control scheme.
Yeah.
And I still think our control scheme is really cool, and if people just gave it a shot, they would love it. But to a certain extent, we really tried. We pushed in almost too many directions at the same time. We pushed the tech and the visuals to do a fully open world, fully explorable world from sitting down, but you could still go 360 degrees in any direction.
Right.
Explore in any direction, open world, long vistas, and VR just isn't quite ready for that yet. Now, I think there's some technology that's there, and if we can get, if there's a possibility ever of porting Golem to a better, more robust system with better controllers that are laser rather than light ball, and if everything just works a little bit better and the vistas are good, and I think Golem might actually find an audience, because there's some things about it I really love.
I actually played Golem for a bit, preparing for the interview. Picked up the hardware and everything. I did.
Wow. How many times did you have to recalibrate? See, that's the thing.
I didn't finish Golem because of that. It was, and I hate saying it, but it was a challenge to get through at times because of the technical limitations. I'd love to hear Jamie's.
No, it's okay.
I'd love to hear Jamie's insight on that.
He's got it. He's got insight.
Well, I'm a little afraid to ask, but did Highwire Games suffer from crunch while working on Golem?
No. One of the things about Highwire Games is that we are not going to force people into horrible crunches. Now, there was a certain amount of crunch, like Jamie definitely probably more than anybody crunched like crazy towards the end just to get it out the door. But like, no, we didn't, the studio wasn't crunching on Golem.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of different opinions on crunch culture, but one of the most concerning to me was an indie developer that I spoke to who told me that they believed it was a necessary evil, that no game on Earth could even ship without it.
I will agree with that. So let me just say.
Well, okay.
So let me just say what that means. No game on Earth should ever ship with the Halo 2 crunch.
Yeah.
Okay. But I can't imagine doing a TV show, if you have a deadline, if you got to get this commercial on TV because the Super Bowl is happening on January 6th, like whatever that is, there is going to be a moment where you have to put in the extra time towards the end. If you're in entertainment, you do not have a 9-to-5 job with 2 weeks of paid vacation.
Even me, believe it or not, sponsors with their deadlines. I mean, and I do not want to compare myself to the gaming industry with this, but I mean, it's anywhere. If it's your job and you have deadlines.
Yes. And if you're on a roll, like you're doing something, it's like, yeah, I need to get this out by 5. I told everybody it's going to be live 5:00 tomorrow. And you're still working on it the day before. And you go, oh my gosh, it'd be so much more fun if I did this other thing. Mm-hmm. Well, all of a sudden it's 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night and you're still working on it. Well, that's crunch. That's what that is. It's individual creative people saying, I can make this better. I still have a little time. I want to get this in under the wire. So the idea that you're not going to have passionate people towards the end of a project working extra, and that could be called crunch, is insane. To have management saying you are not allowed to leave, you have to put in 80 hours, you have to put in 120 hours, you're not putting in your amount of work. If you're not here 100 hours, we're planning on it the last 3 months of this project.
Project Red.
Yes, okay. So when the management of these people actually plan for these kind of crunches, that's criminal. That's criminally insane. I hate that. But I do understand the side that says you can't do a TV show, you can't do a movie, you can't do a game without at some point a certain amount of extra final effort is all that remains. I mean, that's going to happen. And you hope people are excited about that. But to force people into killing themselves and breaking up with their families, and that's just insane. Yeah, that can't happen.
I think it really just becomes the difference between whether or not it is voluntary versus, just we have to get this thing out.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I also think that if you have the right kind of people, they're going to want you actually start seeing this. You start seeing them. They're staying later and later, and they're like eating at their desks, and they're sleeping under their desks, and they're doing these crazy things.
Yeah. And
then if you're in a position of management, you say, look, you got to go home. I want you to go home. I want you to spend the weekend with your kids. Like, this isn't good. What you're doing is not good for you, which means it's not going to be good for us. So you're not allowed to come in. Sometimes you actually have to say, no, you can't volunteer to crunch anymore. You have to take a break.
Good. Yeah. That's so refreshing to hear. You don't really hear that kind of thing in entertainment, especially gaming. That's what we're trying to do. And we're not the only ones. There are other veterans in the industry that are hoping to have studios that have some sanity. But I think it's going to be impossible to say, okay, we need to ship, on November 7th, and our final milestone is, October 20th, and not think that the 2 weeks prior to October 20th that people aren't going to put in more than 40 hours. Right.
I mean, they're just going to.
It's just, I think a lot of that ties into the whole, I don't know if you also are like this or people you work around, but I feel like with a lot of creative projects, especially larger ones, it can be so easy to get invested, and then in gaming especially, it turns into feature creep where there's always more you want to add to it. Without deadlines, I don't know if I'd ever get anything done. I'd be iterating on it constantly, and it's you need that final cutoff point that says, okay, this is the part wherever it has to go live. You have to get it out the door. It has to ship. As opposed to
well, you know my 3 things, right? So
do I?
Well, I thought you did your research. Yeah, if you watch my I don't know, there's something I did a thing just 5 years ago in Sweden. So it's on my YouTube channel. It's probably way down the list. It's the Nordic Game Conference. I've talked about this for years, but I have my principle of game development is there's 3 steps. Number 1, and I used to have this on my whiteboard back at Bungie for years, just was up there. So number 1
was that around? Was that up in the same place as respecting the goose?
Yeah, be nice to the goose was over on this side, and then the three principles. Number 1, don't die. Number 2, ship. Number 3, make money. So that sounds stupid, but actually it's brilliant.
Of course.
But of course, don't die. There's a lot of meaning there. Don't die. Don't kill yourself. Mm-hmm. Nothing is worth dying for when it comes to what we're doing. Okay. So number 1, if you die, everything else has failed. So don't die. Keep yourself healthy. Don't die. Ship. Now that's really important because it doesn't matter what you do if you never ship. And ship could be just hit the milestone, hit the deadline, get something in people's hands, whatever that is. And that's how and then make money. So like if you're not making money, then
you can't do the other things. Yeah,
can't do other things. So
I am remembering this now. Yeah.
Yes, you cannot make money if you're dead or you haven't shipped. So you have to do it in that order.
Right.
That goes down to like the smallest level of even what you're doing a web show, right? Well, you're not going to kill yourself. At some point, you're going to have to figure out how to pace yourself. But then you need to ship. You need to get it on your YouTube channel. And then you hope that you get an audience. And that's the same as making money, or your advertisers want you to do it and they like what you're doing. Like if you stop making money, then you're not going to have a project. So, but you have to do it in that order. And if you find yourself killing yourself, you're violating rule 1. So.
Some 5-ish years ago, you said that you felt that the gaming industry was about to reach its golden age. Are we there yet? How's that going?
Wow, I don't remember saying that. You'll have to remind me what I meant. I probably there was a point when I jumped into the video game business. I thought, wow, I think I've missed it. I think the golden age has already happened. I hope I can jump in and grab onto the tails and see what happens. So it's weird to look now back in hindsight and people think like, oh, Marty was one of the pioneers. What? No, not at all. I think to a certain extent with the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 and all the Nintendo products and the PCs, I think the last 20 years, there's a lot of golden age stuff going on. But we're now at a point where people no longer have to make the kind of compromises in production quality because of the platforms. So I'm looking forward to seeing how much that frees up people. But I'm still shocked at the things that I'm being told we can't do because we don't have the CPU or we don't have the bandwidth or I'm like, what? Like, how, back in my day we did it on 52 megabytes, or whatever. Right. I still remember like the first time we bought a new rack-mounted hard drive. It had a fan to cool it, and it was like, if we buy this was in the 90s. We bought this hard drive, we put it in the rack, we could record to it. And I'm like, well, this is it. This is the pinnacle of space and hard drives. It was 1 gigabyte. And it was the first time we had anything we could say gigabyte. And it was like, this is a full gigabyte. Yeah. And now you're sitting there with like, a terabyte on a USB drive. Yeah. I mean, it's like, what?
I remember, I mean, even on a much smaller scale than that, I remember reading terabyte on a hard drive and thinking, how? What? And nowadays it's a standard. Everyone has one. You're weird if you don't have that much space.
Of course. I know. I mean, I got like, what is it? Do I have 3 terabytes in my Dropbox now or something? It's
something like that.
Insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just like, because of like how powerful, how fast, how much, all these things, but people tend to like flood with, oh, okay, now the visuals have to be all 4K at 60 frames a second. And all of a sudden they filled everything up. Yet we still need bandwidth. Like I'm going to be limited on voices. Physics don't work. Like, well, we can't have physics on these plants. Well, then take the plants out. That's the way I feel. So anyway.
Yeah. No, I get you.
But I mean, think about your animated videos. It's like, okay, 4K, 60 frames a second. I don't think you need that, right? It's like, look at what you're trying to do. Maybe that's not the ideal, right? So
a lot of that's just buzzwords. It helps sell move hardware or this and that. And
exactly.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is indicative of what people tend to gravitate towards more. Like what is more easily recognizable for the average consumer? Oh, I see more pixels. This is quantifiable, or something more abstract, like the way sound is approached. It's harder for people to measure that. They don't pay as much attention to it on average. Visuals are, it's quite literally in your face. You're looking at it. So it's easier to measure incremental upgrades, I think.
Well, I mean, this is why I think it's cool that people in your age bracket, which is, I still sort of am astounded at the insight that someone your age has. So when you're comparing Halo original with the remastered version, and you're just looking at something as simple as, why is the flashlight no longer needed? Maybe that's indicative of a problem.
Yeah.
and I'm like, yes, why does this kid see that? And these people that did this thing 10 years ago not have a clue about it. I honestly don't get stuff like that. No, it just seems so obvious to me. I just don't understand it.
Me too, man.
Like, yeah, there's just why is it so bright? And why did you change all the background textures and make everything confusing? Like, can't you see if you played our game that, like, this is why we gave you a flashlight?
Yeah.
It's like, it was to make things scary and like you dark, and so you used a flashlight. I mean,
to be fair,
watching you say this is hilarious. So.
I heard a few people say that it was therapeutic in a way.
Well,
but yeah, I don't know. I from what I've heard, and a few people did reach out to me after I put that out. I'm sure this will come as a surprise to practically nobody who looks into this or works in the industry, but it really does seem to be a product of mismanagement and deadlines.
What I also appreciate about this new generation of people your age who are like saying, "Oh gosh, we get to talk to Marty," and I really appreciate that you guys are excited about that. But what it makes me realize is, like, we all thought he was dead. Because like number one, I'm old, so it's like, wow, he's still alive. That's amazing. But number two, I haven't really engaged with the Halo community for a long time. Mm-hmm. I never stopped loving Halo. I talked myself blue in the face about Halo, 15 years ago. I talked about Halo all the time. So, but I'm glad to see that people are still playing it. I'm actually thrilled that there is such a thing as the Master Chief Collection that I could even complain about. I mean, that in and of itself is an honor that it exists. So kudos to 343 and all the people who work so hard to make something that I can even complain about. Just from a sort of, what might have been standpoint, like Joe, Marcus, Paul, Jamie, me, Jason, we're all still here in Seattle. Like, none of us left or died. Like, as soon as you're going to make the new version of it, like, yeah, improve it, make anniversary edition, make all this stuff. But if you're also going to just bring forward the thing we made, just run it by us once and we'll come in for free and just spend a day telling you what you could fix. Oh, Marcus would have come in and within 2 seconds he would have said, hey, wait, did you include the shader that does blah, blah, blah that I put in at the last minute or whatever it is? Or Joe would have said, oh, wait a minute, we swapped out Captain Key's, cinematic character, just before we shipped and we forgot to tell you about it or something.
Right.
Like, his in-game character was not the cinematic character, and Joe will remember that he swapped it out with like 30 minutes left. I mean, because that's the way Joe worked. But like, we have the tribal memory and the tribal knowledge to just come forward and say, hey, you know, this is great you're doing this. We can fix it. You know, we'll take it the last 10% of the way. And I don't know why we couldn't.
Imagine how many people at 343 would be thrilled to be able to work with the original guys. I mean, business politics. Yeah, it's not up to them.
They sent me. Hang on, one second.
Okay. Oh, all right,
what
wow.
is this? Halo Legendary Edition. I don't even know what this is. It's completely unopened, but it's signed by all these guys, all these people over at 343. Super nice. You know, thanks Marty for all you did, for paving the way. It was great to meet you. It was this really nice thing that they sent me. Thrilled to get it. So like, it's not like I think there's a bunch of people over there saying, you know, how can we screw this up? None of us think that. It's just that like Marcus, Jamie, Paul, me, Joe, we're not working at Bungie. Mm-hmm. We've been out of Bungie for a long time. There's no business strings attached. We could just go over for a day and
I wish that I had some of this context prior to making that video, because I felt like I could have been a little more fair. I mean, again, it's not even just upper management saying, you know, arbitrary rules this or whatever. At least with Anniversary Combat Evolved, from what I could tell, a lot of it just seemed to be a project that seemed doomed from the start. You know, like, I mean, they had 6 months to make really, when all was said when done, to go from reverse engineering Halo to shipping the product.
Yeah, and that was in 2010, right? Was that 2011?
Yeah, 2011.
Where were we? Yeah, we were gone. Yeah,
yep.
we were working on Destiny, and there was tension between Bungie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bungie and Microsoft had a lot of tension, and to be honest with you, most likely none of us who were working on Destiny would have been willing and able to help out with the first version of Halo Anniversary. And I guess that's sort of understandable. You know, things were too new and kind of raw. But like now, like another 10 years has gone by. It's like, hey, well, I'll help you out. What do you need? Anyway,
as much as I and many others would love that, it just comes. I mean, this is what it all comes down to. It's they already have a remaster. Why remaster a remaster? I mean, we know why, but they won't do it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they won't squelch any of the fans who are trying to make a fan version of the original Halo 1 for PC and use what they've already made and just fix a couple of the mistakes. It's like, I hope they just say, yeah, go ahead.
There's
download it.
There's some encouraging stuff going on there. I've been keeping a close eye on the Master Chief collection updates. And more recently, they've been talking about mod support that's a little more comprehensive. Legal stuff keeps them. I assume legal stuff keeps them from talking about details, but they're in the iteration stage, and it seems like they want to more actively support that kind of thing rather than squish it like they might have done in the past. So that's encouraging. Yeah,
legal stuff.
Yeah,
I hate legal stuff. I really do. It doesn't make it screws up. It screws things up. I mean, when I see, okay, I'm going to say this to you and to all the fans who might be watching this.
Go for it.
I don't own the copyright on any Halo music. I cannot give you permission to use any Halo music on anything. I give you my blessing. I have no problem with people using it ever, but I can't even give you permission. So stop asking me to give you permission. I would say have good luck. Use it as much as you want. I don't care, but I can't give you permission. It's not like this has never happened before in the history of music, especially. So you know who Joe Cocker is? Maybe your dad knows.
He probably knows. I'll ask him.
Yeah. What would you do if I sang you a tune? You know, he's the gravelly blues guy who sang, "Try with a little help from my friends." Like, it's a great song, okay? he didn't write that song. That's a Lennon-McCartney song. It's the one that, Ringo sang.
Mm-hmm.
Ringo sang a cute song called Try With a Little Help from My Friends. Lennon and McCartney were songwriters, and they're like, I hope somebody else in the future covers this song, because as composers, we're still going to make money on it. Joe Cocker says, I love this song. I'm going to cover it. I want to do a blues version. And he's like, and he does this great version, and he made money on it. Everybody can make money. The cover artist, the publisher, the new publisher, the original composers, the new arrangers, everybody participates. This is not rocket science. Like, there is a way of divvying this up based on people's contribution.
But what if I had more money, though? What?
You should have more money. I'm hoping you will eventually. Well, you're only 22. You don't need money yet.
I'm fine.
But you should fight for what you deserve, and people should not be taking advantage of your.
Yeah, no, it's copyright is an extremely touchy subject on YouTube, and it's a nightmare for everybody. I do mean everybody. There's only one.
It's going to change. I think I've been waiting, and I finally did get one of those copyright strikes against something. And
so really?
It shows me how I could respond to it. And so I responded by saying, I'm the composer. This is the music I wrote. And then they're like, oh yeah, okay. I mean, so I finally got some human being, instead of an automated stupid thing, figured out what it is. But frankly, if the publisher, the copyright owner, actually wanted to do something bad to me, they could. I'm assuming they don't want to do that, because then I'm just going to tweet about it, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of people are going to be up in arms.
Exactly. That's the only time that. That's how things get done on YouTube a lot of the time. It only happens whenever people big enough make a stink about it. You want to know the kicker to that is whenever there's a copyright strike thing and it gets sent off, if you choose to say no, like you did, if you choose to fight back on that, it doesn't fall onto YouTube or some third party to figure out who is right. It's the company. So if you choose to take this strike and say, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't right, the company are the ones that get to say, no, we are right, actually. Yeah, that's where it ends. No, with me, that's not where it'll end. Right. Because then I'll go ballistic with whoever that is. And then people already know I've gone ballistic with Activision, Bungie, and Microsoft. So it just doesn't make sense to me that these corporate overlords think that. And it's not even like I'm trying to make money on it or anything else. I'm actually just saying, hey, is anybody curious how I came up with are you curious about that? Because I can tell you. So what? Microsoft's going to say, well, you're not allowed to tell that story or sing that melody while you tell it. Really? So luckily they're not doing that. They haven't done it up till now. Hopefully they won't do it. So you've spoken before about a concept you like to call emotional equity, usually in reference to recurring music ideas and the impact that can have on the player. But I want to explore that a little more. So how would you define emotional equity, and how can it be practically applied in games and other media?
So equity is something that you possess, and emotional equity would be that some emotion has already been evoked in the player. And now that emotion is now a commodity. It's a possession. And I can re-trigger it again because I know it already exists. So if you've never heard, and you were sitting in the audience at Macworld in '99, and Steve Jobs came out on stage and said, here's this new cool thing. And the first thing you heard was, and the room went dark and you hear the monks. You're going to have this, hopefully, little memory and chill up the back of your spine. And now that emotion you had of seeing Steve Jobs on stage, seeing Jason Jones present Halo, seeing the room dark, hearing the monks sing, whatever emotion was evoked at that moment, it's like a smell, right?
Mhm.
It's like, I remember where I was when I smelled that cotton candy. I was with my grandfather at the carnival. That's what emotional equity is.
Okay.
So there are things that go right into the emotional centers of your brain that if you trigger those same elements again, you will trigger that emotion. So I know that the first time you hear the monk melody, which is hooky, whatever emotions you have, the first few times you hear it, I will be able to recall those emotions by doing that melody again in a new context. So that's why it's equity to me. It's equity to me. It's like I don't have to do a new thing that says, I got to come up with a new mysterious melody. I did it once. It's attached to this one thing, but I can attach it to another circumstance. And if you've already experienced it over here and felt mysterious and a chill up your spine, I'm going to get some of that chill, mysterious thing again.
Right.
So it's just a tool. That's all it is. It's. I hate to say it's a manipulative tool, but it kind of is. I know it's going to. To a certain extent, it's going to work, and sometimes you can do it by juxtaposing a feeling, in a different context, or amplifying a feeling in a new context. There's all sorts of ways you can work with it, but the key is you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. I don't have to make a new mysterious feeling and another new mysterious feeling.
I think that is definitely something that people actively dip into, especially when it comes to marketing.
Yes.
And sometimes that's fine. One of my favorite examples, I know you don't really keep up to date with most of the new Halo stuff, and to a degree I try not to either, but there's a part in the Infinite trailer which has a reinterpretation of some of your work in a way that just hit me so hard. And I don't think it really had any reason to, because nothing that was happening on screen was particularly meaningful. Some will disagree with me on that because Cortana is saying something vague about how she cares about you or something. But because that was one of my favorite pieces of any of the scores in the past, and I heard this new interpretation of it, and it was paced well, and there was some visuals that kind of complemented it still hit me just as hard. And oops, now I want to play Halo Infinite, Well,
obviously that's 100% on purpose. I know that's their goal. That's what Joel Yarger, the music supervisor, and all the creative people at 343 are telling their new composers is work with the material that sort of got us here, rather than maybe rather than walking away from it, which maybe didn't work as well for some of the other titles that they did. Let's embrace some of those things, because that's what we know it's going to push some emotional buttons for the fans.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that well, it transcends manipulation and just becomes something that causes everybody to rejoice. It's sort of like, yes, this is that thing I love so much.
It's
like going home to grandma's house and smelling the turkey gravy or whatever. It's just like, yes, I'm so glad I'm here.
I know you. Your past.
I knew we would be perfect together.
That's emotional equity to you.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's emotional. So I'm thrilled that they're using emotional equity. I read the articles about it, and it's sort of like they keep talking about iconic themes and legacy themes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sort of like, well, you guys realize that came from someplace, right? like
what are you talking about? It came from Halo.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not complaining. Enough people. Well, I keep pushing myself in front of people's faces so they know I'm still alive and I'm there. But I'm happy to see that these things still are able to push a few emotional buttons, and they should use it like crazy. I'm happy with that. You can go so far that people don't even know you're doing it, but they have this feeling that there's something familiar about it. Sometimes you can do it so it just triggers it, and It's all that stuff is great.
There's a lot of that in Halo 2 and 3 and even 1 sometimes, wherever I had these that's probably because I was a dumb kid, but I think it was only a year ago that I listened to Halo 1's soundtrack and realized, oh, this is like half of this whole soundtrack is just the other part of the soundtrack.
Yes, exactly. And like I've said in other things I've done, I'm lazy. So it's like, I'm not going to come up with something new if I already got I might as well stick that melody back in here and get more mileage out of it.
I felt like a genius, but also the dumbest person ever having that realization.
No. Most people don't. When I look at how hard it was for people to figure out I would have been your daddy skull in Halo 3, then I realized like the mechanics of what goes into making music and what's in a melody. And I'm like, it's the only 7-note melody that finishes off Halo, and you're finishing off Halo. Like, how hard was it to play that last 7-note melody? Like, I gave you the entire 7 notes in the rings. I didn't expect all the 7-year-olds to figure this out, or even 95% of anybody to figure it out. But given a few weeks, a couple of music experts and rabid Halo modders and fans and whatever, they would have figured this out, because it just wasn't that hard of it just wasn't that hard.
And I don't blame you for thinking that way. I remember reading a story, I don't know if this was Jamie or somebody else, but I remember an ancient interview where they were talking about how the classic Scarab gun was hidden away somewhere. They were thinking, it'll be years before they find this. Like day three they found it.
I know, it's so funny. Yeah. Well, and we thought the Halo 3 skull, I would have been your daddy's skull, was going to take a while. We thought we were all thinking maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And the fact that somebody hacked the code and shared that with everybody. And then my only thing then was like, okay, great, you hacked the code. If you hadn't hacked the code, how would you have figured it out? Right. And that was the only challenge I ever made to anybody. On the old site, the Marty Army, I would say, look, it's fine. Just tell me how you would have figured it out. All the clues are there. And nobody ever did. So 13 years later, it's come up again. And somebody finally came very close to telling exactly how it was. And then I decided just to spill the beans on the whole thing. So
fair enough.
And now there's those, I think there's glyphs on ODST. I'm not sure what those are. Anyway.
Someone should look into that. Last main question for you. I'm sure you get this constantly, but Halo obviously means a lot to a great many people, myself included. But rather than gush about how much I love your work, I think I've done enough of that. I'd like to hear from you. If there is a piece of media, whether it be a game, movie, song, book, whatever, what is something that is as important to you as a consumer as Halo is for people like me? Like, what's your Halo? That's not something I've thought about before. There are some books that I grew up reading that were very important to me. Chronicles of Narnia, super important. Lord of the Rings, super important. I can see that, yeah. I can see how that would translate.
Yeah. And then I ended up loving the Peter Jackson movies for Lord of the Rings. I was probably as influenced and rabidly fanboying about Gentle Giant as some people probably, are fans of Halo. But I just don't think I was of the age for games. I was already an adult when games were worth playing. So I don't have that sort of like, I was a kid and I fell in love with something. But I have some books, some early movies. I was a huge Star Trek fan. I mean, I just thought Star Trek was amazing. I mean, I'm talking old Star Trek. Captain Kirk. Yeah. I was a huge Stanley Kubrick fan as a kid. So when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was like, 12 years old, I was just like, okay, whatever this is, I want to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So. Man, that movie still holds up. That's a tangent. I'm not going to get into that.
Yes. All right. It does hold up. It's amazing.
So, any updates on the Christmas album?
Wow! I can't believe this many months has gone by and I haven't done a thing on it.
Come on, we're getting close now. We're getting close. It'd be the right time.
I think It would be. I think I'm going to have to get another year going before I do the Christmas album. It's just something I did, and I enjoy doing Silent Night, and I thought, gee, I should maybe do a bunch more Christmas carols, classic Christmas carols my way. And I haven't touched it, so no update.
Fair enough. Well, for anyone unaware,
Merry Christmas, everybody. Yeah.
Merry early Christmas, everyone.
Yes.
For anyone not aware, you should check out the Silent Night. I'll link it somewhere. It's very nice. I really like that interpretation.
You can use it. You can use it right now at the end. I have 100% rights to that. It's a public domain, and I give you rights to use it. So
perfect. Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and get to work on that. I'll be honest with you, I am very new to interviews, and as well as I think this went, the one part that I couldn't figure out is how to end them. So